Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome one of my very favorite artists in the world, one of the best people I know, the first concertmaster of the Berlin Philharmonic, former concertmaster of the Pittsburgh Symphony, all-around amazing chamber musician, and composer as well, Noah Bendix-Balgley. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here, Danny. It's really nice to see you from across the ocean here in Berlin. So it's hope you're doing well, and I'm really happy to talk to you today. The reason I got into doing these programs that really featured classical music with Jewish influences was an invitation from the Jewish Music Festival over in Berkeley, whose director both me and my father knew, and she invited me to come play a recital there. And what she wanted me to come do was a program based on the Society for Jewish Folk Music from St. Petersburg, which was a group of composers around the turn of the 20th century who decided, sort of in the vein of the nationalist composers in the 19th century, that they were going to use traditional Jewish music as a source, as an influence for classical compositions. Before I had this invitation, I only knew one or two pieces from this tradition, most notably a piece called The Hebrew Melody by Acharon. Absolutely beautiful piece that a lot of violinists have recorded. And through this recital I went through, I discovered a whole bunch of other wonderful repertoire for violin and piano. And so since then I've been trying to play that repertoire a lot, and it really inspired me to search further in this direction. And then I started thinking, you know, what's the next step? And so I had this idea in Pittsburgh, where I was concertmaster, of commissioning somebody to write a violin concerto for me, and specifically with a Klezmer influence. And I remember very specifically talking to Michael Alpert, who I mentioned, who was used to be in Brave Little World, and it was just a wonderful expert of Yiddish dance and music, and he's also a fiddle player. And also talked to my father, who of course is an expert in dancing. And I also was speaking to the music director in Pittsburgh, Manfred Honig, about this idea to do a Klezmer concerto. And he loved the idea. But actually the interesting thing was, without talking to each other, all of these people kind of gave me the same message, which was, well, if you want to do this, why don't you try to write it yourself? And it was something that I guess had crossed my mind, but I hadn't really taken so seriously until these people who were really important people in my life gave me that little push and said, you know, you should go for it. Really, I started from the fiddle, coming up with a violin part, and then from there, then I started to sketch out basically a piano reduction of what would happen in the big orchestra. At that point, I had the commission, so to say, to write this piece for the Pittsburgh Symphony. So I was, on the clock already, but I knew I wanted to have somebody help me with the orchestration and do that. And I happened to be playing a concert in Ohio, a kind of run through for a concerto I was doing later in Pittsburgh. And the conductor was the wife of Samuel Adler. So I thought, I should ask him for his advice. And I said, maybe you have some ideas for me. I'm writing this piece for the Pittsburgh Symphony, a Klezmer violin concerto, and I need to find somebody who has some background with Jewish music to help me orchestrate it. And he said, well, I've just retired. I'll do it for you. It's a nice thing because it's something different for an orchestra to tackle. You're not going in there and playing Tchaikovsky concerto or Mendelssohn concerto that everybody knows and does once every 2 years. This is something that's different, and so it's a different challenge for musicians and the conductors, of course, too. But I'm always really, really happy how much people embrace the challenge and trying to really get the right style.
I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how Mahler 5 became incorporated into this.
My parents are not professional musicians, and my dad doesn't read music. For some reason, he had a score of Mahler 1 around in the house, and turned out the reason was that, of course, the Mahler First Symphony in the third movement has a very distinctive section in it where it's a klezmer band basically playing this sort of contrasting the it's a slow movement and it has this slow theme. It's first played by the solo bass, and that's developed. But then there's always these contrasting sections where this wind and percussion ensemble starts playing klezmer music in the middle of the Mahler symphony. Yeah, and it's, you know, if you just took that section and played it without the Mahler, you could just put it on a klezmer disc. Nobody would say anything. They wouldn't say, "Oh, that's Mahler." And so my dad was fascinated by that, and I became also, as a result, fascinated by those influences in Mahler's music. And of course, the other reason I used the Mahler 5 was that when I premiered the piece in Pittsburgh, it was the season finale of that season, and the other piece on the program in the second half was indeed Mahler's Fifth Symphony. So because of that, I thought, well, let's, you know, it's perfect. Let me just tie that in, and give a preview in a sort of roundabout way. In the middle of the second movement, you get a little hint of it in the clarinets playing this melody in thirds. And then I started throwing in these little things here and there, these little, you know, da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum, you know, like the very beginning of the symphony. And then the big thing is at the end of the third movement, which the third movement is a big medley of dances, of Freilachs. At the end of the third movement, as it's been getting more and more virtuoso and sort of exciting with the violin and all the orchestral parts, when I finally have the whole orchestra come in playing fortissimo and tutti, I have them do the klezmer version of this Mahler theme. San Francisco Youth Orchestra, the 96-97 season, which was incidentally also my first like big orchestral experience at all. And so, yeah, you were there too, and now you're a music director there. It's crazy how these things happen. And then we both were, you know, ended up at IU too. You were getting started as a conductor there, but, you know, before that, I remember when I came in, you were like, I kept hearing these stories about Danny Stewart, the viola. You were like the star violist, everything. So it was all like everybody wanted to get you for their quartet and everything. And then I played in this orchestral project, which I think I don't know, was that your first conducting thing or?
My very first.
Very first, and of course, in typical fashion, you didn't say I'm going to conduct like a small Haydn symphony or you know. Something really small. You went for Claire de Nacht from Schoenberg, but you got together, I think, you know, the really the best people in the school. We met for late night rehearsals, and put it together. It was really, really fun. I try to think of that, as a performer, that never to take a performance or appearance, on stage for granted, and never to sort of dial it in or you make it routine, because then there's no point of doing it.
It's always worth thinking about. I think that in any performance in our life, there's going to be a certain percentage of that audience who's hearing that piece for the very first time or the very last time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So just that possibility is enough to hopefully bring us to that point that we should play every moment like it's our last.
These days now, when we can't give concerts, makes that so much more evident. But basically, our entire profession is shut down for months, and we don't really know when it's going to be up and running again. A greeting to the audience and the musicians of the Santa Cruz Symphony, to hope everybody's doing well in these challenging times, and to say how much it was a wonderful experience to be there a couple of years ago to play my piece. This was just, and the way it was received both from musicians and the audience was really meaningful for me. And I hope to come back sometime soon. So I'm wishing everybody all the best in these crazy times, and hoping that the music can start up again soon and we can all get back to doing what we love, which is playing music for audiences and sharing our music with the world.